Okay, today we are going to learn all about vernal pools. Do you know what a vernal pool is? You might, but I know before I started this job, I certainly didn't know what a vernal pool is. And Trevor's going to give us a pretty extensive description on hand about what a vernal pool is, talk about its attributes, the ecosystem surrounding it, the critters and vegetation that live there, and I think you're going to enjoy this one. So put on your learning cap, because this is a pretty detailed discussion of kind of a deep dive into deep dive. I didn't do that on purpose, but a deep dive into a vernal pool description. So anyway, thanks a lot, Trevor, and take it away.
Hi, this is Trevor Edmonds, the SPLC's Director of Land Protection. Once again, thank you for tuning in to the Socially Distant Science and Adventure video series. I hope you're well. I hope you're being safe with your family and loved ones. Today I want to talk to you about a topic that's pretty interesting to me and actually kind of ephemeral by nature, and that is about vernal pools. Now, you're probably asking yourself, what on earth is a vernal pool? I asked myself the same question years ago when I first heard of them. But like any word or anything we talk about in nature, you kind of have to get to the root of the words that describe it. So what do you have? Vernal and pools. And vernal is a word of Latin origin, which refers to of spring. And pools obviously are kind of what's behind me, a pool of water of varying sizes. So vernal pools are essentially, you'll hear them referred to as different things. Vernal pools, vernal ponds, temporary ponds, ephemeral ponds, all sorts of things that basically mean the same thing. And basically what it's referring to is an area that is temporarily flooded or only flooded or holding water part of the year. And the thing that's so interesting about vernal pools is that they are essentially their own little ecosystem within a larger overall ecosystem. And in the case of vernal pools, they tend to exist most frequently in forested areas. Sometimes they will be in savannas as well, but generally areas where there is going to be an amount of, cover vegetation of some sort. And then also you have the input of leaves and other things that contribute to the development of those pools. Now, the pool itself it exists because they are in lower lying areas. And then also, if you have a combination of either the bedrock being very close to the surface, not covered by a lot of soil, you have a combination of that in some cases, and also a combination of very fine soils, such as very silty or clay-heavy soils, where they can basically form a layer underneath your topsoil that's able to hold water and prevent it from perking so quickly. The other case, or other instance that makes vernal pools possible is a high water table. So that's kind of the case with this one for sure, because we're actually not too far from the Saginaw Bay shoreline in a forested area. And especially with the way the Great Lakes water levels have been the last couple of years, the water table in some of these areas is very high. So the presence of these is even more so. It's more pronounced for sure. But basically what you have here is a pretty good sized vernal pool. They range from up to a couple acres in size in some cases, all the way down to having a spot where you basically have a tree that might have fallen over, and in the little depression of ground that it created, that can fill up with water and create a vernal pool in and of itself. And the reason why these are so important is because, like I was saying earlier, they essentially are habitats within other habitats. They're little micro ecosystems. So you have a whole variety of different species that benefit from the existence of these. You can kind of see behind me here that there's a variety of different shrubs and tree species. Things like pin oak, red maple, sugar maple, silver maple really frequent these areas, and sometimes you'll even see, depending on the soil that exists around the vernal pool itself, even some different pines. Like there are some white pines in the area here too, especially if you're in like an area where the soils are a little more sandy around the edge of the pool itself. You'll also find a lot of different variety of shrubs, especially those that are more tolerant of getting their feet wet. Things like buttonbush, gray and red osier dogwood, and even things like highbush cranberry are very common. Then actually, as far as some of the more vegetative species that exist in the water itself, you kind of get down close to the water here, you can just kind of make out some of these green little specks that are starting to grow here now that the temperatures are warming up. That's duckweed. That's a very common species that you're going to see grow in these areas. And then as far as other species too that will grow in the water or come out of the water on the shore or the edge of these is a variety of different sedges and rushes as well. But it would not be uncommon for the entire surface of this to be covered in duckweed once the temperatures warm up, and the growth of that can really explode. And that's actually another thing that's really kind of amazing about these is when they do cover with duckweed, and then in more typical years where by midsummer, maybe mid to late summer, when they start to dry up, you'll just see like this green mat that's created on the ground after the water dries up. But one of the other things that's really amazing about these is because of the nature of, when these areas are flooded, they create perfect areas for a whole variety of species to thrive as well, especially herpetofauna species. So that includes our reptiles and amphibians. So just kind of thinking about, the areas that frogs favor for laying eggs. This is a really great spot because, as you can imagine, it's not a coastal area, so there's not going to be a lot of wave action or things that are going to disturb frog eggs. So it's really easy for things like leopard frogs and wood frogs and even green frogs to lay eggs within or in the vicinity of these areas, so they'll do really well. And one of my favorite species that actually exists in these is called a fairy shrimp, which is actually pretty amazing because it is a crustacean species, as you would think, because it is a shrimp, but there's actually a whole variety of crustaceans that can exist within these. It's pretty phenomenal thinking that you could just find this, basically what looks like a little flooding in the middle of the woods, and that there would actually be shrimp in it. And they are a smaller species, but they are a crustacean. And just a lot of other things will frequent these as well, depending on the location. Sometimes you'll find different wading birds, like herons, egrets, things like that, and even like some other different shorebirds will also kind of pop up from time to time. And then with the frogs, you're definitely going to be seeing tadpoles in these as well. The Michigan Natural Features Inventory is a great resource to check out online in terms of a very state-specific resource for more information on vernal pools. I actually visited the site earlier today too, just to kind of brush up on some of my knowledge to retell some of that today. But yes, vernal pools are a very exciting habitat within the other habitats that we protect at the Conservancy. And if you want to get a closer look at one, we're actually out at the Joe Sainel Nature Trail out in Hampton Township. But if you go to Topico Marsh as well, which is part of the Bay City State Recreation Area, there's a lot that exists out there as well. And this is a great time of the year to get out because you can really start to hear frogs singing, spring peepers, chorus frogs, wood frogs, things like that. And then while you're out there too, especially in the next few weeks to a month, when it warms up even more, we're going to start seeing more of our spring ephemeral wildflowers like bloodroot and trilliums and trout lilies and things like that will start to come out. So it's a great thing to explore and read up on. So once again, thank you for tuning in, and hope to see you again soon.